G'day everybody, it's Matt here, and today I'm comparing the Cooler Master Notepal X3 laptop cooler with the Thermaltake massive V20 notebook cooler. So these both have huge 200mm fans in them, and so I would expect them to have some comparable cooling performance. Now, right off the bat, the Cooler Master X3 is rated at 16 to 23 decibels and moving 65 to 76.5 CFM of air based on its 500 to 850 RPM. In comparison, the Thermaltake Massive V20 is rated at moving 70.38 CFM based on running at 600 to 800 RPM and operating at about 31.7 decibels. So based on those key stats, straight off the bat, we're looking at a slightly louder fan in the Thermaltake compared to the Cooler Master. The Thermaltake is both slightly faster at its slowest speed and slightly slower at its fastest speed than the Cooler Master. So the Cooler Master does have a wider range there, which gives it a lot more control over that volume, which again rated at 16 to 23 decibels compared to the 31.7 decibels of the Thermaltake. The Thermaltake doesn't tell us what the range is, but based on the airflow ratings, it would appear that the Cooler Master can move more air at its highest speeds of 76.5. I'm assuming the Thermaltake's 70.38 is the maximum. So based on those couple of stats, it sounds like the Cooler Master will have a broader cooling capability whilst also operating more quietly. In terms of dimensions, we can see here that the Cooler Master is clearly a bigger unit. It is wider than the Thermaltake, and it looks like it's also deeper. And according to the actual dimensions, this is the case. Now, both these stands claim to support up to a 17-inch laptop. So how do they actually compare? Well, right off the bat, let's put a 13-inch MacBook Pro on them, shall we? So on the Cooler Master, there's plenty of room here. I question whether it would do a 17-inch. Like 15-inch, you're probably coming out to about here. So I feel like 17-inch, you're going to be jumping even further off the edges here. So I'm not sure that a 17-inch would truly be supported here. And if we look at the actual measurements, diagonally, based on the flat surface here, so I'm not going all the way to the corners because it's not all flat, but we're talking about just under 18 inches. So based on screen size, yes, it should fit. Depends, I guess, on how big the laptop is around that, but it's going to be right off the edges here. On the Thermaltake, looking the same way, we're actually coming in diagonally at only about 16 inches. So a 17-inch laptop is definitely going to be hanging off the edge of this cooler by at least an inch diagonally, and that's not taking into account how much it might jut out. Like some gaming laptops have coolers and other things that come out the sides further. So based on that, this one is definitely not a 17-inch, even though it does say it's suitable for up to that. Having a closer look at these otherwise, the Cooler Master does not have any sort of ledge, lip, rubberized finish or anything like that to hold a laptop on. So sitting here, you can just push it straight off. Whether that's a problem or not probably depends on the laptop and what its feet are like. The Thermaltake has a broader hexagon mesh, which is more likely, I would say, to catch, because it doesn't feel as slippery as this small hexagon mesh in the Cooler Master, so more likely to catch with rubberized feet. It does also have its own rubberized corner pieces here, so that should help to hold laptops on. It also has a small indent in the mesh that comes towards the bottom here, which should also help to catch feet of smaller laptops. So looking at this one on here, it does catch on those rubberized corner pieces, and that does help to hold it in place. It's definitely not sliding anywhere near as easily. The lip didn't really help with this laptop, but those rubberized corner pieces do. So underneath, again, both massive 20mm fans. The Cooler Master mainly has intake directly below the fan here. The Thermaltake does extend out the sides, so it gives it a bit more intake room there. And both have these adjustable feet. So in the Cooler Master, they pop up like that, and there's only that one tier. And on the Thermaltake, they pop out that way. And again, only the one tier of angled height. We'll have a look at how they actually sit next. In terms of feet though, they both have rubberized feet at all corners, both when the extra legs are extended and also when they're not, so that should lock them in nice and tight. Both do have some cable management. For the Cooler Master, we've got this loop here for looping your cable around. In the Thermaltake, we have this little system here, and it does have a built-in USB cable for power, whereas the Cooler Master uses a detachable cable. So with feet extended side by side, the Cooler Master clearly has a greater angle, with the height at the back being about 3 inches, whereas the height at the back of the Thermaltake is just about 2.5 inches, so it is lower at the back than the Cooler Master. At the front, the Cooler Master does get down to only 1 inch at the front of it. Same thing basically on the Thermaltake. So that also means the Cooler Master has a steeper angle when the feet are extended compared to the Thermaltake. So at these angles is when some sort of lip or other thing, such as these rubberized corners to help hold your laptop in, is really going to be important. On the Cooler Master, it doesn't take much at all for the laptop to slide at this angle. Like just that slight brush, and it keeps sliding and all the way off. Whereas the Thermaltake, at that angle, it doesn't. Combined with those rubberized feet, it actually stays in place a lot better. It still has some movement, but a lot more secure feeling than on this Cooler Master one. In terms of connectivity, the Cooler Master Notepal X3 uses a mini USB for power, and it has a USB out, so it does allow you to plug something else in and run it through here. So if you're using a USB port on your laptop, you're not losing a port by plugging this in. We also have a fan speed control, fan on and off button, and also an LED on and off button. These both have blue LEDs in them, and we'll turn those on in a moment to have a look at. On the Thermaltake, there is no connectivity. We simply have a USB cable for power, which is a pass-through cable. So you can plug this into your laptop and then plug something else into this plug. Now, as I mentioned, that is hardwired into here. It is not detachable. So we've connected this up to power now, and there are 4 LEDs in each device in the corners. So the Thermaltake is definitely brighter. However, the Cooler Master does have these little blue lines at the top and bottom, which add a bit more emphasis to that color. I think it's also partly the smaller mesh does make these ones seem brighter because it's more see-through than the finer mesh that's in the Cooler Master. So that is the Thermaltake Massive V20 notebook cooler compared to the Cooler Master X3 laptop cooler. So both have some pros and cons. Both are rated very similarly. Both look very similar. Pros and cons to each one. The Cooler Master is definitely the more versatile and has more options built in as standard with those controls. However, the Thermaltake is a really nice option that is simple and easy to use. I do like the fact that I can remove the cable from the Cooler Master, whereas I'm not such a fan of it being fixed in the Thermaltake. I feel like the key thing with the Thermaltake here is that it is more secure for your laptop, whereas the Cooler Master doesn't really have anything to really hold your laptop in place, especially at angles, and I think that's potentially an issue, especially for larger laptops. Speaking of larger laptops, I'm not convinced about the Thermaltake with a 17-inch laptop on it, even though it's rated for that. I think 15-inch is probably where you're going to max out on this one. The Cooler Master, I feel like, is also going to struggle with a bigger laptop because there is nothing to hold it on with. So I hope you found this video helpful. Be sure to like it and also subscribe to my channel for more videos like this from me. And if you're interested in either of these coolers, make sure you check out the affiliate links down in the description. Have an awesome day, and I will catch you next time. Bye for now.